Welcome back, Dynamic Diary fam. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel to get more untold African American history stories. All right, let's get it. Today's video of untold African American history is about this country, history of medical neglect, abuse, and exploitation of Black Americans. The medical system has historically dehumanized African Americans and continue to do so. According to the Washington Post, the exploitation of Black people in the future United States began the moment enslaved Africans first embarked on these shores, and the medical abuse of the enslaved was completely linked to their bondage. Doctors plied their trade in the slave quarters of southern plantations to protect the slaveholders' bottom line rather than to ensure the well-being of the enslaved, and the cures they offered were often worse than the disease they aimed to treat. In return, they got to practice their craft on non-consenting patients with no access to legal remedies should they be harmed in the course of the treatment, as many were. Yes, they're still doing it to this day. For example, J. Marion Sims, the founder of modern gynecology, developed his technique of repairing vaginal fistula by experimenting on enslaved women without anesthesia. Ouch. In his biography, he recalled operating one woman, Lucy, whose agony was extreme. Another named Anarsha, I probably said it wrong, endured 30 such operations at Sims' hands. The medical abuse of Black people in the name of medicine continued even after their death. Medical abuse of Black people in the name of medicine continued even after their death. Medical colleges paid enslavers and grave robbers alike for bodies of the Black dead, which were used to teach young doctors to call cadres about human anatomy. This practice continued after the end of the Civil War, and stories of night doctors who murdered Black Southerners ran rampant amid the large climate of post-antebellum racial terrorism. There are similar stories over the course of the next century. In the 1930s, Cornelius Garner, a formerly enslaved man, told an interviewer from the Works Progress Administration that he bumped into a young doctor who tried to kidnap him and perform medical experiments on him. Decades later, Babette Lax, told journalist Rebecca Scott about growing up in the predominantly Black neighborhood of East Baltimore, near Johns Hopkins, famous medical school, hospital in the 1950s. And this is his quote: "When it got dark, we were young. We had to be on the steps or Hopkins might get us." So that was just known that, like, if you're not home on time, they'll kidnap you, and they're still doing that. Honestly, a lot of these harvesting of bodies and cells, I believe there are doctors and scientists, and the government is behind that. Shh, you didn't hear it from me. Likewise, when dozens of Black children went missing in Atlanta between 1970 and 1981, some African Americans in the city suggest they had been kidnapped by the Centers of Disease Controls. Babette Lax, mother-in-law of Henrietta Lax, had gone to Johns Hopkins Hospital seeking treatment for a tumor on her cervix in January 1951 and died later that year. Cells from her tumor were harvested without her consent and have been used in biomedical research ever since. For decades, the family was unaware that lac cells known as HeLa had been used in this way, and despite the cells, commercial use did not receive compensation until earlier this year. Beginning in the early 20th century, doctors also forcibly sterilized, they're still doing that, women who were deemed mentally or morally unfit for reproduction. Kind of sound like Handmaid's Tales. These women were disproportionately black. That wasn't a Handmaid's Tales, though. It was a few black people. Involuntarily, sterilizations targeting poor women and women of color continued until at least the 1970s. Wow. In a number of states, including Alabama and California, California is where I'm from and live, has continued up until the present day in women's prison. So they're still practicing unethical things on black women, surgeries and all types of experiments, so it hasn't changed. African Americans also made up a disproportionate number of those who were exposed to radioactive materials without consent as part of experiments to determine the effect on the human body. Some were injected with massive dosing of platinum, yay, while others were bombarded with radiation under the guise of some other treatment. Platinum, like, that is very dangerous. There's a video on YouTube talking about that, so check that out. It's very scary and dangerous, and it should not be experimented on humans. Arthur Henriette A. Washington wrote a book called Medical Apartheid: The Dark History of Medical Experimentation on Black Americans from Colonial Times to the Present Day. This book presents the first detailed account of Black Americans abused as unwitting subjects of medical experiments, and that is still going on today. Like many Black women, such as myself and my family, Black women right now, the maternal rates are horrible, that Black women die just giving birth, the fibroid epidemic. I have fibroids, and I just had a last week, a doctor told me she would have to remove my uterus. And I just think they just do not care. It was no emotion, nothing. That's why the black people don't have trust for the, doctors, because I honestly they do judge us harshly, especially, they see some of us black women like myself who are heavy size, like we don't really care for ourselves. So there's a lot of bias. There is a lot of bias. I'm like, they need the training that, the training I had, implicit bias. So black women today are still fighting against racism in the medical field, and I know firsthand. And I grew up around the medical field because my mom was a medical assistant for years, and even became a coder. So, but it's still, we're not represented a lot in that field, and I'm happy that more black women are joining the field, but I just don't want them to be tainted, because not to be throw shade, but I had some black PAs and I had a black doctors for years, and I know it's not all of them, it's some really good ones, and now I have a good doctor, and she is a woman of color, and she really listens to me, and that makes the difference. But I'm just happy that I just want to bring this subject up because this is still affecting us today. I just heard today an interview with Venus and Serena. Venus has a foundation to help black women get the medical care they need. I'm happy about that. And also another interview with a doctor who's bringing more awareness of the racism in the medical practices. And this is something we need to talk about, because too many black women are dying giving birth. And who has the financial means? And I'm gonna link a video with the football player's wife. She had the finances, so it's not even a financial or like a classism. It's not even a classism or finances, because they're very well off. But so it has to be just because of the color of, your skin. And I just think, as a young woman, for a doctor to tell me to get rid of my uterus, I'm like, I was like, what if I meet a good guy or a nice guy? And her attitude was, there's no good guys. Like, she was a woman of color, Asian, and she told me, well, I got a hysterectomy and I just adopted. But I'm like, I don't want to do that. Like, women, we're having babies in our 40s. I mean, I'm not a fan of that because there is high risk, but I just want to that this is nothing new. So we have to be advocates. We have to, if that doctor is not working for us, go find another one. Keep looking until you find that one. I have found one that I truly love, and I'm like, please don't retire. But yeah, it's nothing new. And I'm harvesting, our organs like the young men in Atlanta. This stuff is nothing new. I believe there are evil people that work for the Center of Disease Control, and they're still doing experiments on black bodies, especially those who don't have a voice, who live in lower economic status. So I'm thankful that, Harriet is bringing this attention, and please go get her book. I can't wait to read this book because this affects our livelihood and our lives, and it's no reason we should be dying because we don't have the lack of health care and good doctors. So, yes, good doctors. So, I want you to please like, comment, and subscribe and share a story if you have been treated wrongly in the medical field. But the whole purpose is to shine light. And I just want you guys to pay attention to your bodies, advocate for yourself because we need you, black women. Have a good one. See you next time. Bye bye.